people who are lonely have a higher risk of heart disease. Managing your blood markers is one of the critical steps. You're not going to get type 2 diabetes if your blood sugar and triglyceride levels are always normal.
Siim may be the most humble biohacker out there, author of about 19 books. His podcast has 407 episodes. He has 190,000 subscribers on YouTube. He has interviewed Tom Bilyeu. He has 402,000 followers on Instagram. On Amazon, he has books with a large amount of 5-star reviews. 773 reviews, 568, another 562.
Longevity is about minimizing risk, so you don't want to be just careless with your health, the fundamentals. The exercise, good sleep, and maybe like a few supplements, but the majority of the effort, in my opinion, would be...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity podcast. I was already excited to interview our next guest, Siim Land, because I had actually seen a bunch of his content and I'd already connected with him way back in February of 2020 when he was gracious enough to have me on his podcast, which at the time was called Body Mind Empowerment and is now called Siim Land Podcast. That's episode 161 if you're interested in checking that out. As I started preparing for this interview, I just kept getting more and more excited. I do have to preface this with Siim may be the most humble biohacker out there. I always ask for some sort of bio providing a framework for my introduction, but not only did Siim have this section blank, even his bio on his own website is not very verbose. So as I continued to delve into Siim, I discovered things like he is the author of about 19 books. His podcast has 407 episodes. He has 190,000 subscribers on YouTube. He has interviewed Tom Bilyeu, which I would love to get into, but I don't think we're going to have time. He has 402,000 followers on Instagram. On Amazon, he has books with a large amount of 5-star reviews. 773 reviews, another 568, another 562. By the way, this is amazing. It's hard enough to get people to buy your book, let alone leave a review and then have them all be positive. He is, in fact, here today to discuss his newest book, The Longevity Leap, a guide to slowing down biological aging and adding healthy years to your life. His degree is in anthropology, and he is a trained sniper. So for today, I'm going to call him the Indiana Jones of biohacking. Siim, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, well, that was a pretty awesome introduction. So I'm, also excited to talk with that person.
If we could just round him up. Oh, wait, we've got him. All right. Yeah. So first, I like to get some background. You're from Estonia, where military service is mandatory. When you went through sniper training, how has that impacted, if at all, your biohacking journey?
Well, I went to the military when I was 19, so that was before I knew about biohacking even. So I wasn't doing any form of specific health optimization or longevity routine back then, but I was into fitness, so I started exercising and lifting weights and paying attention to diet when I was 18 or 17 years old, before the military. And during the military, or this, I guess the sniper school specifically, was that one things that you do learn there would be enduring cold. So as a sniper, you have to be still for many hours, and in the winter months, in the autumn when it's raining, and you have to be kind of unseen in that sense. So you need to be very kind of patient and stagnant and still, and kind of endure these kind of physical elements. And of course, it teaches you a lot about just self-control and mindfulness, or being very kind of diligent and conscientiousness. So if they do interviews before that, so that they don't let anyone into that kind of a vocation. So they interview and ask you about your personality traits, and I think my personality trait would have already just fit that job as well in that sense. So I am naturally more kind of quiet, or I guess, stoic and less more emotionless, and kind of very patient in that sense. So I think I just learned to cultivate that skill a lot more in the military.
So it kind of ties into my next question, right? So your YouTube videos from 2016 to 2017 actually talked about self-development, including your sniper school video. The first 3 episodes of your podcast were actually focused on the mind, and maybe that's because of the focus in sniper school. But at one point you transitioned, and what brought about that change from self-development and mindset to your current focus, health, wellness, and longevity? And maybe talk a little bit about your grandfather's impact on that transition.
Yeah, well, in the beginning I was just, doing videos, experimenting with different videos, and I didn't have any, focus in that sense. I just made videos that I found interesting about, and nutrition was always a part of that as well. But I guess I noticed that videos about my 1 meal a day diet or some intermittent fasting and some supplements and things that became a bit more like popular, and I just figured that, hey, this would be, it kind of created itself from that. So I also enjoyed the health and fitness aspect a lot as well. And I think for my own personal life, what got me really interested in the longevity was, like you mentioned, so my grandfather, he died to colorectal cancer when he was 36 back in the 80s, or even before that, I don't know exactly when, but he was like very young. And I was just, not interested in experiencing any of this kind of preemptive chronic disease that would shorten your lifespan a lot. And obviously I don't have any like good genetics in my family. I don't have any like long living grandparents or great grandparents. So I'm just trying to figure out how to be as healthy and live as long as possible myself. And that's like from my own personal interest, like my personal health side. And during my early 20s, I was also reading tons of books, and some of the books that I was reading about were also about this life extension, or just the idea of humans being able to live exponentially longer in the future. So I guess that was the combination of these factors that got me interested in like preventive health and longevity and biohacking, in that sense of trying to live as long as possible myself right now, so that in the future there's gonna be something more interesting, more impactful that we discover.
So your grandfather kind of highlighted, because maybe you hadn't even looked at the landscape of your own relatives to realize like nobody's really living long. That was a kind of an acute case of, okay, definitely not living long. That kind of brings it to the forefront. And then you were already kind of playing around with videos. Why'd you get started with videos? Like not everybody runs out and starts making videos, and you were doing some pretty actually creative stuff, and and I think having a lot of fun. What was driving that in the early days?
I mean, I was just interested in self-development or growing as a person, and I read just tons of different books about philosophy. So I made some stoicism videos, obviously nutrition and diet, exercise, business, whatever, like different kind of books to just grow as a person, and I kind of enjoyed that. And I started my blog about similar just personal development topics. And then it grew into more nutrition side. So I was like, I guess doing the not only like health stuff but also like mindset stuff. But eventually I just shifted into the like the nutrition and the biohacking side.
Did you kind of always see that you might make videos? Is this something as you were growing up? Was there a particular, I don't know, influencer at the time that like, hey, I want to do those exact kind of things?
And no, like I wasn't. So like, I mean, I guess when I was a child, I liked drawing, so that was the only like artistic or creative thing that I did. Wasn't like a writer even in high school or anything. I started writing in university. That's where I discovered that I'm actually pretty good at writing. And so I wrote some books, started the blog, and then I guess for me, it was like a logical step that I also need to do video, because video, is kind of the biggest medium for online and media consumption. So it's just, if I want to be successful as a writer, then I need to have some video presence as well. So I just, slowly started to make some easy videos, like presentations, like, most of them aren't actually even on the channel anymore. But I just started from scratch, literally just, the first video I made back in 2016, which isn't on the channel anymore, but it was just me talking on a camera about something about like a hero's journey is this concept. That was pretty interesting and like powerful in my opinion. And I never waited for the perfect moment. Like my first videos were super bad. I had like bad English, or I guess not bad English, but I was having like, this massive pronunciation or accent. And I never like waited for some sort of perfect moment. I was just, I'm going to just start, and I progress and to get better over time. So right now I think I have pretty good videos and pretty good quality as well in the production side. So I just never had the idea that I'm gonna quit or anything. Like I never had the idea that okay, I'm just gonna stop making videos, or I've never had the idea of quitting doing my blog or video production or social media or something like that.
Well, and again, just going back to your very humble, like some of the videos that I saw that were pretty early on had some kind of fun, like you were doing really cool stuff, and spending, it was obvious that you were spending a good amount of time. Let's jump into your book. First, your book has 7,738 references, which turns out to be about 360 pages of just references. Instead of printing those pages on a printed version of the book, you created an online page where people can go, they can search. So my first question is, how long did it take you to write this book?
Yeah, well, I started writing in September last year, and I finished in April. So, that's something like 8-9 months. And I had some of the content, obviously before. So some of the baseline content for some of the chapters was already ready. But I did have to, I decided to make it like much more thorough than previously. So even though I had even some solid baseline material from previous books, I just decided, okay, I'm going to just go very in depth with it, and also just frame it specifically around the idea of longevity, and base the knowledge around like reducing the risk of all-cause mortality or the risk of particular of these chronic diseases, and like tying it together from just the perspective of longevity. So there's many things that are good for weight loss, and weight loss is generally good for longevity as well, but I wanted to make it specifically about longevity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and apparently tie it back to a large number of references in each case. Like it's just a pretty phenomenal job. Did you work with an editor or a publisher who asked you to kind of remove sections? Did you struggle with what to include and maybe what not to include?
No, I didn't have any like editor or anything. I had a proofreader, but I just decided myself, okay, which sections are kind of worth to keep and what I'll remove. I mean, the book was much longer before, so the initial draft was maybe like at least 100 pages more, but I just cut out a little bit of the noise or some of the just to get it more to the point, because one of the criticisms from the previous book has been that it's a bit too scientific, and it's kind of a chasm between the readers, that some people like it super scientific and super like complex and descriptive, but others want to just tell me what to do and make it more easy to read. So I tried to just make it a bit kind of a balanced this time to I still have it pretty like scientific and pretty like descriptive of the science, but I don't go into like super deep with all the pathways and stuff. So I'm just trying to focus on like the actual outcomes and like what do you actually do while keeping the science accurate.
So what does the longevity leap mean?
Yeah, so The longevity leap essentially means extending or bridging the chasm between your health span and your lifespan. So every one of us has our like lifespan, which is, you know, when we die, but every one of us also has our health span, which you could, you know, technically refer to as like your biological age or something like that, but it means like the like amount of health you have, so like functional independence and being free of certain comorbidities. So if you get diabetes, then I mean it doesn't necessarily mean the end of your health span, but it certainly degrades the quality of your life and degrades your health span quite a lot. So there is a pretty big like difference between the people's health span and lifespan nowadays. So there was this 2021 study that was actually called the longevity leap as well in the title, and they show that the average lifespan in the world in 2020 was 73.6 years, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. But the health span was 9.6 years lower, so you know, 64, something like that. So it's like there's a pretty big difference between the amount of years you have in your life and the kind of quality of those years. So the goal of the book, first and foremost, is to bridge that chasm, to extend your health span so that you would spend more time and spend more life or more years of your life without these comorbidities. And by doing that, you it's also like, you know, reasonable to say that by extending your health span, you're also extending your lifespan, because healthy people live longer generally. And the earlier you get certain of these comorbidities and chronic diseases, then the shorter your lifespan is typically going to be. So my book isn't about living to like 150 or 200 years of age. So it's not about transhumanism or this radical life extension, because, you know, frankly, we don't have anything that works for that right now. So there's no evidence that living to 150 would be possible as of now. But my book is about extending the health span. So you slow down aging, you slow down the degradation of your health, and then you add healthy years to your life. So it does. So it's, you know, yeah, like reasonable to say that extending your health span will extend your lifespan as well. But we're not talking about, you know, 50 years. It's gonna be mostly like maybe 10, 20 years at maximum. But the reason it's important to realize, or the reason it's important to kind of have this mindset to extend your health span and lifespan as much as possible right now, is because of this, future prospect of maybe in a few decades we will have certain medical technologies that will extend your lifespan by 100 years. So the only way to reap the benefits from that is to stay alive until then. So you know, no matter how old you are right now, the longer you stay alive, the higher the likelihood it is that you gain more years to your life. So typically there is this, you know, that mortality rates increase with age. So the older you get, the higher risk of mortality becomes. But, you know, in a few years or so, it might be that it actually starts to decrease because of the advancements in medicine and science. So yeah, my goal of the book is to just extend the healthy years in your life and extend some of the actual maximum lifespan as well. And then you know, maybe the next book will be more about, okay, what are some more advanced like medical procedures.
The goal is, let's figure out how to equate lifespan and health span, right? And really you should be pursuing health span anyway, because you just feel better, and I think like everything that I'm doing that's healthy tends to make me enjoy life more, and you also have the potential benefit of extending that life. And I talk about, you know, if you really are, if you buy into the longevity escape velocity, then at some point there will be a last human who dies of natural causes, and it would suck to be that person. Well, I mean, they might not know, but like you want to be on the other side of that finish line for the most part. And I think that's true for a lot of people, although you would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, given conversations you might have, that a lot of people are, one, not interested in living longer. And I think that's first because because the health span is not equivalent to the lifespan, right? So I get that, and if you can address that. But there's a number of people who are just not interested in really living longer. And I think think there's, maybe they need to go back and listen to your mindset videos to make some changes there. Now, your book is broken down into two main components. One is delaying chronic disease, and two is slowing biological aging. If you could only focus on one of these, which one would you focus on and why?
Yeah, I would, from a impactfulness side, then delaying the chronic diseases is probably more important because, how long someone lives is just, in most cases, just determined by whether or not they get heart disease or cancer or diabetes, and when do they get it. So if you get a heart disease or heart attack in your 60s and you die, then you might have had some of excellent genetics to live to the age of 100. But yeah, you got a heart attack in your 60s, and then that's the end of your life. So that's why there's a bottleneck in most people's longevity and their potential for living longer. And that bottleneck is one of these top chronic diseases, which are like heart disease, this COPD, this pulmonary disease, but that's mostly because of smoking and those kind of things, cancer, neurodegeneration, diabetes, kidney disease, and in more developing countries, it's also diarrheal diseases and infectious diseases. But in Western countries, industrialized countries, it's more these lifestyle related chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, and Alzheimer's. So the goal the goal is to just delay them as much as possible, because if you get diabetes in your 30s, then your life expectancy is much shorter than if you get diabetes in your 60s or 70s. So if you get diabetes in your 30s, then it's projected that your life expectancy might be shorter by up to 16 years. But if you get diabetes in your 60s, then it's only 3 to 4 or 5 years, something like that. So that's why getting these diseases later in your life is generally better, and the earlier you get them, then the kind of worse it is. If I could only focus on one thing, then I would still choose the slowing of the biological aging. It's more about, it's a very fluid concept, or so we don't have a full grasp of it, and it's hard to understand what it is. But the reason I choose it is because biological age, or chronological age, is the biggest risk factor for all of these chronic diseases. So the risk of getting Alzheimer's is very close to zero if you're 20 years old, and 40 years old even as well. The risk of Alzheimer's tends to increase in your 70s and 80s, and heart disease as well. Your risk of heart disease and getting a heart attack in your 30s is very low, even if you follow an unhealthy lifestyle. So the deaths from heart disease start to rise in the 50s, late 50s and early 60s and 70s and etc. So getting older is the biggest risk factor for all of the chronic diseases. And every one of us has, obviously our chronological age, which is the age of our passport, but we all have our, biological age as well. As a theoretical concept, we don't have a way to, see, okay, what is your biological age? There's a bunch of different tests, but I think it's fair to say that none of them are really accurate, or we don't know what it means, so to say. So there's no gold standard for these biological age tests. But as a theoretical concept, we all have our biological age. And that is determined by your genetics, your lifestyle, your health, so your health span, and your environment. So, you can control your genetics. Some people just have very good genetics and they live to the age of 100 with suboptimal lifestyle and smoking and drinking alcohol, whereas someone else might die in their 60s because of the more unhealthier or worse genetic profile. So your biological age is something that you can control, within reason, but it just mostly comes down to following these healthy lifestyle habits, these fundamental habits that are linked to slower speed of aging and lower biological age, as well as reduced risk of all these chronic diseases. So some of these, let's say exercise is a very important thing, and the older you get, the worse your physical performance tends to become. So if you are able to maintain higher physical performance for longer, so you're able to have the VO2 max of a 30-year-old if you're 60, then that's, I think, it's not that you're 30 years old biologically, but at least your fitness status is, you're not, again, as fast as a 30-year-old, but at least your cardiac function is very similar to that, and that you can apply the same idea to a lot of the other biomarkers. So like muscle strength, body composition, cholesterol, blood sugar, inflammation, liver function, kidney function. How does your whatever biomarker it is compare to your chronological age and to other age groups? So for example, you might have blood sugar levels that are above normal for your age, so blood sugar levels do increase with age as well, so they get worse with age. So you can say that, okay, if I have worse biomarkers, and let's say blood glucose levels are worse, then you are, again, it's not a perfect analogy, but it's like you're in worse health than your peers. And if you have better biomarkers, so let's say your blood sugar level is, let's say, more optimal and lower than your chronological age would predict, then you're also in better health. So your health span is with a lower biological age. And I think it's important to apply it to a lot of these other biomarkers like VO2max and whatever the biomarker may be.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes. Send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
So you just mentioned blood sugar, kind of being able to manage blood sugar deteriorating with age. I wonder how much that, and if anybody's looked into how much that has to do with just muscle mass, right? If you think about sarcopenia and the fact that muscles are incredibly adept at helping manage your blood sugar levels, is that tied to the classic fall off of muscle mass and muscle strength, or is that an independent variable on its own? I don't know if you even have that information.
Yeah, well, I guess, it's hard to say what it is caused by. I mean, there's multiple factors there. So, probably the biggest is just sedentary behavior. So people tend to move less the older they get. And, after the age of 30, recreational physical activity kind of drops off the cliff for most people. And and even more, you can say so the same after high school. So most people don't sprint regularly after high school. So their fast twitch muscle fibers begin to deteriorate quite fast, and their muscle strength also begins to deteriorate. It's multiple factors that contribute to that. So you never want to look at a single thing, obviously, or single biomarker or single let's say result on a test. You want to look at as much as possible, kind of, or within reason. But muscle mass, increasing your muscle mass and exercising will reverse that increase in glucose with age as well. So and many other things as well that increase with age, like blood pressure. Some of these are related to aging, so organ function, especially kidney function. I think that would pretty independently start to deteriorate with extreme ages. So if you're over 100 years of age, then it's very likely that your kidneys will have more suboptimal performance than compared to in your 20s. So some of the organs do deteriorate with age, but but it's not going to happen in your 60s for most cases. So the death to organ failure or death to aging will mostly happen after the age of 100, and if you've delayed some of these or avoided a lot of these chronic diseases.
So, and it's interesting you mentioned the sedentary life. I remember reading an article on probably Men's Fitness magazine. The headline, and I think it was even the cover article, was your metabolism slows down as you age, which just irked me, right? Because I'm just thinking forward, and as I read the entire article was like, no, your metabolism doesn't slow down as you age. You slow down, and when you slow down, your metabolism slows down. And if you reactivate, right, so if you become active again, your metabolism goes up again. So delaying chronic diseases, I want to talk about that a little bit, because I think a lot of people don't realize, they have this mindset that if we just were to solve, cancer, or if we were just to solve, heart attacks, that all of a sudden we'll live a lot longer. But the reality is it doesn't extend your life by much, because age is the biggest factor. Do you touch on that in your book? Is that something that you talk about, and how would you kind of focus on addressing these chronic diseases?
Yeah, so they do say that if you cure all heart disease, then that would increase life expectancy by maybe like 3 to 5 years, and cancer as well is 4 years or something like that. So yeah, like if we just eliminated heart disease, then yeah, people aren't going to live to 150. That's just kind of the fact. But I think it's important to still focus on them pretty aggressively, because like I said, the bottleneck for most people will be one of these chronic diseases. So you can't talk about living to the age of 100 if you can't make it past 80, and you can go down the list. You can't talk about living to 70 if you can't make it past 60. So you need to kind of reverse engineer from there and remove every of these bottlenecks one at a time. And the biggest bottleneck is heart disease for most people, and the average age of a heart attack is 64, somewhere in the 60s. So about like 50% of people who get a heart attack die. So it's not like a death sentence for everyone, but you don't want to take the gamble with that. And like I said, and it's also like if you get it, then the quality of life and the projected life expectancy after that is going to be greatly reduced as well. So you still want to delay them as much as possible. And the centenarians as well, who live to the age of 100, they've found that there's like 3 groups of these people. There's the survivors. So these are the ones who do get a particular chronic disease like heart disease or diabetes before the age of 80, and they still make it to 100. Then you have the delayers, who delay these chronic diseases until the age of 80, and then they make it to 100. And then you have the escapers. So they avoid all these chronic diseases until the age of 100. So most of the centenarians, so like 87% of the centenarians, are either delayers or escapers. So there's only like a small, like 13-15% of the centenarians who ever reach the age of 100 are these survivors. So there's kind of shows that the more you postpone these chronic diseases, the greater your life expectancy is going to be as well. And ideally, you want to avoid them altogether. But I think it's currently it's like hard to like eliminate all of these diseases completely. So, Alzheimer's has no cure, cancer has technically no cure, and heart disease has no cure either. It's more about management of the progression in that sense. So you want to always just delay and try to avoid them, so to say, with the proper lifestyle habits. And that comes down to just like I said, the fundamentals: the exercise, good sleep, kind of moderate diet, and maybe like a few supplements. But the majority of the effort, in my opinion, would be maintaining good metabolic health, maintaining regular physical activity, managing your stress, that you're not chronically stressed out. Social relationships are also quite important. It turns out that people who are lonely have a higher risk of heart disease and mortality, or socially isolated, which might be a subjective like feeling. It's not like some people like to be alone that they're gonna die, but it's more about subjectively feeling lonely and feeling isolated, and then also just having these normal biomarkers. So I think managing your blood markers is one of the critical steps for just delaying these chronic diseases, because you're not going to get type 2 diabetes if your blood sugar and triglyceride levels are always normal. So to get diabetes, it's going to also take a lot longer time, it's not going to happen overnight. So if you eat like cake for one night, like a birthday cake, and the next morning your blood sugar is like in the diabetic range, you're not going to be getting diabetes at that point. It's going to just come down by the end of the day probably, because it's just like an unordinary event. But if you have chronically that high blood sugar levels for weeks, months, years, then you will be diagnosed with diabetes at some point. And then you have the other things that come along with that. So like there's between any kind of food, any activity, and this chronic disease that will shorten your lifespan, there is the blood marker or set of blood markers that mediate or reflect that risk. So for diabetes, it's fasting blood sugar, fasting insulin, hemoglobin A1C, triglycerides, HSCRP, maybe visceral fat, and those kind of things. And with heart disease, it's also blood sugar markers, triglycerides, inflammation, ApoB, Lp(a), homocysteine. So there's a set of biomarkers that need to be out of the range, either too high or too low, to increase or mediate the risk of this chronic disease, so to say. And if you always pay attention to the blood markers, like the blood markers being your North Star in your lifestyle, then you are effectively reducing the risk of these, or delaying them and reducing the risk of these chronic diseases. So for kidney function, you start to see that, okay, your EGFR levels start to be suboptimal, then you're not immediately going to get kidney failure or kidney disease. So it takes a bit longer time for the disease to progress, and you need to have the biomarkers in the suboptimal range for a bit longer, like a few months and potentially like years for you to get the chronic disease in the first place. So if you never measure these markers, then you don't know where you're at. You don't know if you are trending towards diabetes or kidney disease or heart disease, for example.
Are there any biomarkers that you're kind of interested, focused on, that other people aren't talking about? Is there anything that's maybe on your radar that's not on other people's radars?
I think I'm pretty aligned with a lot of the thinkers in the space in terms of what is important to pay attention to. Of course, there's a lot of conflicting opinions about whatever cholesterol or homocysteine or kidney function or creatinine, whatever it is. But I think like a healthy body should probably have all of the biomarkers at least in like normal range. So there are maybe like a few. So everyone, like nobody has 100% perfect blood work. There's always like a few things that might be slightly elevated or something like that, but they're never going to be like super off the range. Then there might be something wrong. But there's always a discussion. Okay, your blood sugar is 94 instead of 87, so that doesn't matter. It's just kind of randomness. There's always going to be some few percentage here and there that is slightly off the range. And I think you need to kind of look at them all. So like not go crazy with them. You need to look at like hundreds of these biomarkers, but some of the most important ones like hemoglobin A1C, fasting insulin, homocysteine, triglycerides, CRP, LDL cholesterol, total cholesterol, HDL, VLDL, ApoB, Lp(a), homocysteine, EGFR, the list goes pretty long. So maybe like 30, 40 biomarkers are the ones that are kind of useful to look at on an annual basis. But there's also like, hundreds of them that you could look if you want to go really deep. But I think the 80% of the information and the 80% of the valuable information comes from maybe like this 30, 40 of the biomarkers.
I think I saw in your social media you recently in India, and I'm assuming looking at blood biomarkers and all of that stuff at maybe a biohacking boot camp or something. Talk a little bit about am I correct? Like that's one of the pieces of that event, and is that an event that you're that you're involved in putting together?
Yeah, so it's. I'm doing like a retreat with this clinic, Ivo clinic in India, and they have pretty much like a 360 comprehensive diagnostic overview of your like health. So they do a biomarker test, also a blood marker test with 183 biomarkers, urinary amino acids, so like 30, 40 amino acids, Then they can do DEXA scan, VO2 max test. They have full body MRI, ultrasound, echocardiogram, different kind of liver scans, and a ton of different kinds of tests, plus doctors that help to interpret those test results. They have massages, physiotherapy, spa therapy, hydrofacial, dentist, eye doctor, gut specialist, gut tests. So yeah, like it's pretty much like whatever kind of issue you might have or concerns you might have, they'll help you test it and help to guide what to do next. So I'm doing these kind of retreats. It was my third time. I'm gonna be doing them in the future as well, and it's all done in this 5-star hotel. And I guess the reason I'm doing it in India is because it's like 3-4 times cheaper than in the US. So even if you pay for the flight tickets, even from the US, it's still exponentially cheaper than doing all these things in the US. And it's also useful to do it, this under one roof, or like in this 1 week period. You just every day do different tests. You always hang out with all the guests as well, have amazing food. So it's like a vacation, but you're doing it for your health. And I think it's pretty amazing.
Do you know when do you have your next one scheduled already? You know what the time frame is, or?
I'm going January 3rd, so right after New Year.
Okay, cool. 2025. I want to talk a little bit about some different sections of your book. Chapter 19, it's the fat thickens, a reference to the phrase, the plot thickens. Talk about fat and how it is at the core of a thick plot.
Yeah, so I guess I just named it trying to be clever with the title, but dietary fat and heart disease and mortality, it is obviously a pretty controversial topic. It's had a lot of different kind of opinions over the last 50 years, 60 years, even longer. So, but it is quite important, I think, because heart disease is the #1 killer, and you do want to, if you were to place your bet on whatever opinion or theory, then you need to make sure that it's the correct one. If we're talking about heart disease, because like I said, it's the biggest killer for most people and the biggest bottleneck as well for your life expectancy. So in the chapter, I just talk about the history of, I guess, the research about saturated fat intake and heart disease, as well as the other types of fat, such as omega-3s, olive oil, etc. And then I just outline some of the research about, okay, how much fat is kind of optimal, and what types of fats, how much saturated fat is linked to heart disease. And I guess the main message of the book is that the lowest risk strategy that would, based on the evidence, be the lowest risk and be the kind of optimal is to follow somewhat of like a Mediterranean style diet. So healthy omega-3 fats from fish, seafood. Some nuts and seeds are also healthy for some of these whole food omega-6s. Maybe not too much, but like increasing your omega-3 intake typically has been found to reduce the risk of heart disease, and achieving a higher omega-3 index, which is a biomarker that you can measure, is also linked to lower risk of mortality and lower Alzheimer's and heart disease. And the other like Mediterranean foods like olive oil is also pretty consistently linked to lower heart disease and mortality, as well as polyphenolic compounds in coffee, vegetables, and those things as well have a pretty good track record of health benefits, and they're also like their consumption is linked to lower risk of heart disease and mortality. So I think longevity is about minimizing risk. So you don't want to be just careless with your health, and you don't want to like just listen to a lot of different opinions, and that, or even if there are a lot of conflicting opinions, what out of those opinions, what's the lowest risk, so to say, like, and what are the other potential benefits you might get from the other strategies. So if the other strategies, although they might not be associated with that big of a risk, are you getting any of the benefits that would justify that risk, so to say? With the Mediterranean diet, it's like it appears to be the lowest risk, and it also appears to have the greatest reward. So in my opinion, it's just the most obvious opinion to choose. And from my own blood markers as well, I've seen just improvements adopting that kind of dietary pattern. So like more of omega-3s, olive oil, some nuts and seeds, and polyphenolic vegetables. So, and dairy as well is part of the Mediterranean diet. So yeah, it's not that like saturated fat and stuff is bad. It's the other fats tend to be better. So let's say like olive oil tends to be better than butter in pretty much every way.
I think the Mediterranean diet doesn't really have a high kind of protein intake. That's my impression. Really haven't dug into that much. And I'm currently kind of eating a lot of protein, and I've noticed a significant impact on my muscle mass without changing how I'm training. Where do you sit with like protein and potentially the Mediterranean diet not having enough protein? And maybe I have that wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can do the Mediterranean diet in many ways. There's no like specific macro ranges for the Mediterranean diet. And, there's different types of Mediterranean diets. So there's the clinical Mediterranean diet, which does have certain recommendations, and which is also like a lot of the research is done with that. And then you have obviously the Mediterranean countries, but every Mediterranean country has a different cuisine. They have like very similarities. They all kind of drink a little bit of wine and consume olive oil and vegetables and fish and stuff like that. But there's regional differences in there. But I think protein is pretty important for longevity, especially because of the reduction in muscle mass that happens with age. But with protein, you don't need like beyond what is necessary, so to say. So you only need a certain amount to support muscle growth and muscle maintenance. And beyond that, you're not really harming your health. There's a lot of this fear that mTOR gets activated when you eat protein, and that shortens your lifespan or gives you cancer. But there's no human evidence to suggest that. But again, it's like, okay, you're already getting the maximum benefits from the amount of protein you're eating. And if you eat more than that, then okay, what's the reason for that? Like there's no practical reason for that. Maybe you would be better off by getting more carbohydrates or fats in your diet instead. But yeah, the optimal amount of protein for maximum muscle growth appears to be 1.6 grams per kilogram of lean body mass or 0.8 grams per pound of lean body mass. So that's lean body mass. So everyone has different amounts of lean body mass depending on your body fat percentage. But you could say that if you're going to use total body mass, then it would be maybe like 1.5 grams per kilogram of total body mass or 0.7 grams per pound of total body mass. Then you can get like, okay, that would be approximately the same as the 1.6 for lean body mass. So that's based on the research, the maximum you would get for muscle growth benefits. And even lower than that is also in a lot of cases appears to be pretty okay. But the elderly people might need a little bit more. So they definitely need at least 0.8 grams per pound of lean body mass for protein. But beyond that, it's not going to help with muscle growth anymore. If you leave eating less, then you might not build that much muscle, but you will be able to maintain it quite easily still. So yeah, maybe less than 0.6 grams per pound wouldn't be recommended for muscle maintenance, but over 0.8 grams per pound isn't necessary either.
Isn't necessary. And thank you for translating that for Americans to the per pound of body mass, because we struggle with that. All right, in your book, you talk about learned optimism on the optimistic versus pessimistic scale. Where do you see yourself? How have you used the concept of learned optimism to make adjustments to your personal outlook, if you have?
Yeah, so optimism is also linked to longevity. So like mental health appears to have almost like they do suggest, some of the scientists or researchers, that there's like a causal link between mental health and longevity, which means that mental health can support in you living longer, and vice versa. Having poor mental health causally like worsens your physical health as well. So you have higher stress hormones, lower HRV, and those kind of things. So it is pretty important to have good mental health, and there's many things that go into that. But the optimism side is also something that they do find that is linked to longevity, and centenarians, they tend to have higher optimism than like younger age groups as well. So there may be some genetic effect there, or maybe causal as well, that the optimism and the better mental health actually makes them live longer as well. So optimism is something that has a genetic component. I think genetically I am more pessimistic in that sense, or I am more like melancholic as well naturally, but I think I've learned to be more optimistic, and in my day-to-day life I don't experience a lot of like pessimism or anything like that. I'm pretty focused on my work and also like optimistic about the future. So yeah, there's like a lot of ways you can learn optimism, but in like the biggest effect comes from just your self dialogue. So like, how do you talk with yourself, and how do you have like confidence about yourself? Because if you are like, pessimism comes a lot from like past, like withdrawing memories from past failures or something like that. So like these past experiences where you weren't succeeding in a particular thing, and now you're like drawing conclusions from that for the future, which makes you more pessimistic. So like it's kind of useless to do whatever thing because XYZ that happened in the past. Whereas with so like this concept in positive psychology, learned optimism, that you can like cultivate optimism, is something that we all have to deal with day-to-day lives. Like there's always going to be some of this small negative talk in our back of our heads every once in a while, but it comes down to like not listening, but also just rewording it. So changing the words in some sense, like changing the way you speak to yourself and changing the way you like perceive the future.
Yeah, I can definitely confirm there's a genetic component. I've got my wife and I have 14-year-old twins, one boy, one girl, and Alan is just wired negatively. The first things that are coming out of his mouth are negative, and so I'm just constantly working on, one, become aware of it, and then two, kind of strive for another side of things. We've actually come close to our time. I don't want to take too much of your time. This has gone super fast, so I want to thank you for connecting. I do have some wrap-up questions. They're always kind of fun, and so we can get through these. Do you have a target age that you want to live to?
So I heard from one guy, Dan Sullivan, he had the idea that he wants to live across 3 centuries. So for his goal, he would have to live like 134 or something like that. So he's a bit older. For me, that would be like 106 years. So I guess that would be like a good goal to live across 3 centuries. But yeah,
106.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think that's a good starting point. I'm always like flexible with my goals. So
I like it. How long do you think humans can live?
yeah, well, the oldest living person was 122, and I think it really was her who lived that long. So she had some good genetics, and it was like they calculated it was like 3% chance that she lived that long. So it is possible to live over the age of 120, and they do project that within this century someone will break the 130-year barrier. Mm-hmm. So, but that's going to be by the end of this century. They do say that some of the other like theorists say that the human body has a potential to live until like the age of 150, but after that it would just break down. So I think depends where do we draw the line between being human and like the merging with robotics and other like, let's say, forms of being. So and if you like replace your arms with robot arms and you replace your organs with these robotic organs, are you still you? Are you still you? And where do you draw the line? Like, do you have to take out a brain for yourself to disappear, or or does it happen somewhere earlier? So if you replace your spine, is it going to, shut down your self-consciousness and then you're not existing anymore? Your physical body would continue, but is it you then, or is it something else after that? So we don't know the answer to those questions. In the future, there's going to be obviously a lot of interesting things happening because of that. So people start to replace their arms and organs with, these technologies. So, is it still them? Or is it something else? So yeah, I guess it's hard to say.
So maybe 150 is the number that I'll jot down.
Right.
And it's interesting that we're entering an era where we'll be printing organs. I think that's just a pretty amazing aspect. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets? Let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts. To longevity and a long health span that you would share.
Well, number one would certainly be exercise. So just regular exercise. It doesn't have to be anything extreme. You don't need to be like an athlete. Just moving itself. So yeah, like it matters much less the results that you're getting with the exercise. So just moving is going to be the key part, and like regular exercise. So you can get away with not exercising if you're younger than 40, even like younger than 50 probably you can get away with it to a certain extent. But after the age of 50, so the natural entropy of the body will kick into overdrive or accelerate quite a lot. So you start to lose a lot more muscle and bone density if you don't exercise. So, but it's important to have like a backup reserve. So you don't want to be finding out in your 50s that you have sarcopenia and low bone density, because it's going to be much harder to like reverse that than if you had like a higher physical reserve built since your 30s, for example. So you want to always exercise in some shape or form, moderately. And the second point would be maintaining a normal body composition. So that would be normal muscle tone. Like too much muscle is also probably like harmful for longevity because of the stress on organs and just being too heavy, and also eating too much food to achieve that. So normal muscle mass and slightly leaner body fat percentage, so like having a slightly leaner body composition, for men at least appears to be more important. For women it doesn't matter that much. So for women they can be anywhere between like 17 to 32% body fat, and there's like no difference in risk for mortality. But for men, like anything above 15% starts to increase the risk. So men would really need, for optimal like risk reduction for heart disease and mortality, they will want to be like lean and below 15% body fat. Yeah, maybe not too lean, like 5% is probably too lean, but 7 to 15% is kind of the sweet spot, I think, for men. And lastly, I would say just manage the stress. So, balance things. So with exercise as well, too much exercise might be harmful, although they find that even with extreme fitness, there's that the extreme fit individuals still have a lower risk of mortality than even people who are like above average with fitness. So with fitness, it's still that the fitter you are, the better it is almost. But the problem here is that you need to be careful not to overdo it or not recover enough. So all the magic still happens when you're resting and recovering, sleeping 7 to 8 hours and taking some time off. So if you're chronically stressed out because of too much exercise or too much restrictive diets or too much supplements, whatever it is, then it might have a negative effect. So you want to kind of balance things.
Excellent. So I've got exercise, body composition, manage stress, and then you kind of threw in sleeping as a freebie. What are 1 to 2 things people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
Maybe people are very focused on diet. So they're focused, okay, is this food going to make me live longer? Is this food healthy? If I eat this food, whatever the diet dogma or opinion you follow, there's always some boogeyman in there. So some people think that fruit is bad, it gives you diabetes. Some people that meat is bad. Some people think that vegetables are bad. Some people think that carbs are bad, whatever it is. So I think people are just very focused on the diet, but they never almost look at their blood work. So, like I said earlier, between whatever thing you're doing or eating and chronic disease, there is the blood marker that mediates the risk. So if you eat ice cream, but your blood sugar and triglyceride levels are always normal, then you're not getting diabetes. And the way you achieve that is usually with exercise or not overeating calories, so to say. So yes, if you eat 1 liter of ice cream every night, then it's very likely that your blood sugar is going to rise and eventually you might get diabetes. But if you only eat, like, let's say, a small cup of ice cream, then it's not going to happen. And the same way, like, if you eat just a single potato chip every day for the rest of your life, so 1 potato chip, that's like 1 or 2 calories. So if you eat that for the rest of your life, then if you run a experiment, like a controlled experiment, then you wouldn't see any difference in the age of death in that sense. But if you eat like 100 potato chips, then the likelihood of you dying sooner will increase. So there is always, okay, how much potato chips are you eating, etc., and in what body are you putting it into, and what else are you doing? So I think it's more important to focus on the blood markers, because whether that be saturated fat, whether that be carbs or sugar, whether that be seed oils, there's always a biomarker that needs to be out of whack because of that food for you to get the particular chronic disease, so to say.
I like that. So less focus on the diet or specific food and more focus on the blood work. What impact does that diet or food have on your blood work?
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that, the diet doesn't matter. Of course, diet has a role, but I guess it's important to... And it means that, some foods do generally promote a better blood marker profile. So like the Mediterranean diet, generally, if you don't ever track your blood markers and you eat like a Mediterranean diet and you have normal body composition and you're not overweight, then it's very likely that your blood markers are also like good. And if you like vice versa, if you just eat junk food all the time, then it's more likely that you have worse blood markers, so to say. But there's like different cases where it's not the case. So the blood markers are still more important, and most people don't follow those kind of diets, so they have always like a mixed type of a diet. And even if you have very healthy whole foods diet, then there might be some blood markers that are still out of the range. So you might eat a healthy kind of paleo diet or something like that, but you might still have elevated ApoB or elevated triglycerides or whatever it is. So the diet itself isn't something that just makes you live longer. If your blood markers are out of whack, whatever the diet is, then you are at a high risk, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so not focus. Excellent. Not flow. Anything else pop to mind in terms of what people might be getting absolutely wrong?
No, I think that's good.
How can people contact you, Siim?
Yeah, I'm Siim Land on all the social media platforms, and my website is siimland.co.
.co, and that's SIIMLAND .co. Excellent. What in the near future are you excited about?
I'm releasing the book pretty soon right now, and I'm been working on it a lot, and I'm excited for people to read it.
The book. Do you know about when that's going to come out, or is it in a month or two kind of situation, or what does that look like?
So I got the books printed and shipped to the warehouse today, actually. So I'll be starting to ship them for the pre-orders next week. So I guess by the time this comes out, then it should already be like in full throttle of being shipped out like regularly. So
Excellent. Well, we'll make sure to get this out. All right, so you can find him. It's Siim Land on all the social medias. It's siimland.co. Siim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.